So today we're gonna talk briefly about temp tables and CTEs. Yay! Alrighty. All right. So we have been noticing that as people are applying for positions and things like that, when you're going through the job submittal process, there is going to be some jobs that's going to be submitted to you for like business intelligence and things like that. Okay. So like my Tableau people or whatever, I'm dealing with a person right now who's Tableau, and they were saying that, well, there's not a whole lot of Tableau jobs out there. So is it okay that we apply for like business intelligence or maybe even SQL developer positions or anything like that? Right. And so she was a little hesitant because, she's saying, well, I'm not really that good in SQL, or, I'm kind of light in SQL and blah, blah, blah. So, and she's not the only one. There's quite a few of people who are afraid to apply for any other job outside of their tool. Now, I'm not saying don't apply for a job outside of your tool. I mean, just only apply for a Power BI or Tableau or Click or whatever. But you need to also be aware of not being able to just only being trapped inside of one box, if that makes sense. Okay. It doesn't matter if you are reporting or data warehouse ETL, you're still gonna have to know SQL. I'm sorry, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Okay. You're gonna have to code. And the thing about it is I heard from one person who's been in the field. And I talked to the actual manager because the manager is a friend of mine. And she was like, he's really, really great when it comes down to like his dashboards and things like that. But I am a little concerned because his SQL, he's suffering a little bit in SQL. All right. So with that being said, I have spoken to our management team along with Ali, and I'm just like, listen, I get the whole messaging thing. I do. Trust me, get it. I get it. But I honestly and truly, this is just my opinion. I just think that you guys really need to focus a lot on SQL. I'm not saying that the messaging part is not important. I didn't really have to do too much messaging in the field or anything like that. What you're gonna have to know is SQL. Sorry, you're gonna have to code, regardless if you're saying, well, I just do Power BI. You gotta still tell the report what to do. So you gotta code. Okay. So the two things we're going to talk about, which is the most important thing, something that you're going to use a lot in the field, is temp tables and CTEs. Okay. So let's get to it. All right. Now, my good, wonderful, wonderful friends. Like I said, temp tables are truly going to be your friend. CTEs are good. CTEs are only good if you need to use them temporarily, or if you're looking for something, or if you know you're not going to use the query a lot. You really just need it just for that one particular thing. Then the CTE is going to be your way to go. Okay. If you know that this is going to be a report or maybe a data warehouse, a query within your data warehouse or ETL, where you know that this actual report or package is running constantly all the time. Maybe this report is actually being used across other type of report managers, or more than one manager is using it. Like this report is being used a lot. This package is run weekly, maybe daily, maybe monthly. Temp tables is the way to go, not a CTE. Temp tables. Okay, so let's talk about the difference. Okay, so we're going to talk about the difference between the temp table and the CTE, and when to use the temp table and when not to, when to use CTE and when not to. Okay. All right. All right. So even though within the actual 12-week bootcamp, you guys learn how to create like views, and you understood primary keys and unique keys and different types of constraints and things like that. And even though you've learned those, unfortunately, my wonderful, wonderful friends, you do not have permission to create these in the field. Okay. And so when I say permissions, does anybody know what I mean by permission, or do you need me to break it down a little bit further? I need you guys to talk to me.
Permission is basically the permissions are with DBA. That's what I know. But like permissions, really like what are permission? I can't explain that.
Okay, anybody else? Anybody else understand what I mean when I say permissions?
Yes, so Mika, this is like, it has related with the security, right? Because the database administrator is responsible for, managing the company database. So I don't think everyone has a permission, right?
That is correct.
That's how I understood it.
That is correct. So that's the word I was looking for. Well, what Ravel said was security. That was the word I was looking for. So, right. So when you come into a company for the very first time, like I said, day one, you don't have, usernames and passwords and things like that. Okay. It's strictly just, HR stuff. Okay. So then after that, maybe about 3 or 4 days after being on the job, you now have access to like the database and the data warehouse and things like that. It only takes about up to a week. If it's a really good company, they'll give you not permissions, they'll give you access to databases and stuff like that before you get there. But most of the time, you don't have access to the database or even your servers or anything like that until at least up to a week. It takes up to about a week for you to get that. So you got to have your username, password. You got to have username, password for your servers, for the database, for the warehouse, for all of this stuff. Okay. And that takes about up to a week because your DBA is the person who actually grants you access to what you can and cannot see. Okay, so that DBA sets securities within certain environments that you can access. Okay, so when I say permissions, it's just like Ravel said, we're talking about security. Okay, so even though in the 12-week bootcamp, we taught you how to create views and triggers and even to create just regular tables, primary keys, unique keys, clustered indexes, all of that stuff that we taught you, you do not have permission, or shall I say access to the database to actually add that stuff onto a table. Okay, you just don't. So, and like we talked about last week where we were saying, well, most of the time you're going to find out a lot of the tables that you're using is a heap. We talked about that the last time, right? So that means because there's no indexes or anything that's on this actual table is a heap, that can actually slow down the performance. Right? So in your mind, you're already thinking, well, in order to increase performance or to improve performance, what are we thinking? We're thinking, let's add some type of index onto there. Let's put a primary key, unique key, whatever it is that we're looking for, correct? But this is the question. What can I do to help with performance or to help me figure some things out? Basically is performance. What can I do to help with performance if I don't have permission to create a view? Because you won't have permission to create a view. You can utilize the view. You can use a select statement. You can access the view. You can go inside the view. You can take a look at it, but you cannot create it. You cannot change anything. You can't do anything with the view but access it. That's it. Just look at it. Okay. It's kind of like when you go in to look at a house for the very first time, it's not, or kind of like a rental. You can access the rental, but you can't knock down no walls, right? You can't change anything inside of a rental. Does that make sense? So look at the view and that type of stuff as a rental. You have access to it. You can come and go as you please and all of that. But you cannot change out countertops. You can't knock down a wall. You can't do any of that. That's what a view is. That's the kind of access that you have when it comes down to your type of tables that you're dealing with.
So
You
Mika,
can't even create a table.
So Mika, I have a question for views. Views are not actually stored in the database, so they are virtual.
Right. So even though regardless if it's virtual, whether it's in the cloud, whatever, you have access to it. You can write a query against it. You can use it in your queries. Views are very, very important because there are going to be times where you have to use a view versus a table. So you can use a view any kind of way. You just can't create it. You can't maintain them. That's the only thing I'm saying. Okay. You can access it. You just can't, you can't create one, and you can't change anything or maintain any existing view. That's what I'm trying to get you to understand. Okay. So I'm going to let you stay in this rental. That's what the view is. I'm going to let you stay in this rental. But I'm telling you, you cannot knock down the walls. You cannot change out the light fixtures. You can't do anything to it. Okay, so you can do whatever. You can invite whoever you want. You can take a look at it. You can access it as many times as you like. You just can't make any changes to it because you don't have permission to make changes. Okay, and you can't just go and say, well, I'm going to build me a house next door. Unfortunately, you can't build a view. You cannot create one on your own. You just can't. You just don't have the permission to do so. Okay, and we'll talk more in depth about permissions and environments and things like that later on in the apprenticeship. But when it comes down to things like that, those views and triggers, even creating tables, indexes, all of that stuff, unfortunately you just don't have permissions because there's so much security set on them. Even if it's in development, you just can't create one. Okay, so when you run across a brick wall, things like that, they hire you because they know for certain that you are a person who can think outside the box. Well, since I can't use this, since I can't go this route, what's my plan B? That's what they're hiring you for. They need to know that you're going to be the person who's going to be able to basically troubleshoot and fix the problem. You cannot run to your boss, Rajni. You cannot go to your boss and says, well, there's no view on this table, or you're probably saying there's no indexes on this table, so can I just add? Unfortunately, no, you can't. You can't even go and ask to add one, because you got to also think you're not the only person using this table, right? Because this table has been used across all of the ETL people, all the SSIS people, all of the SSRS people, all of Power BI, all of Tableau, all of the people who may be in the IT department are all using this table. So you cannot think of it as, oh, well, I'm the only person that's using it. Well, unfortunately, no, right? So you have to think, you can't just say, well, I want to add this index here. It may help you, but it could actually damage somebody else. You see what I'm saying? Because you already know that if you have way too many non-clustered indexes on a table, you're thinking, oh, well, the index is great, so it helps with performance. But if you have a table where you're doing a lot of deletes and changes and updates and things like that, too many non-clustered indexes is going to hurt your performance. It could probably help you because you're probably only using the table once a quarter. You see what I'm saying? But a person like Sophia, who's probably using the table every single month, or making some type of changes to the report every single month, or even just the table, that's going to hurt her. So you cannot think that, oh, it's just me. You see what I'm saying? You cannot think about that. You have to, unfortunately, think of it as team related, because you're not the only one touching this table. So that's the reason why a lot of your tables in the field will be heaps, because one thing that may help you, Rajni, may not help Josiah. You see what I'm saying? So they have to find a common ground, unfortunately. Okay, so now you have
so
access.
Mika,
Mm-hmm.
so when you say troubleshooting, can you determine how you do the troubleshooting on that
I'm gonna
view?
get into, yes, I'm gonna get into that for you.
Okay, all right.
All righty, so now so when you get into the field, unfortunately, these queries are really, really large. They're very, very, very large, okay? So it's very important that on your SSMS, unfortunately, I apologize, I don't have SQL downloaded onto my laptop as of yet. My new one literally just got here like yesterday, so I have to get SQL downloaded onto my new laptop. It is good to make sure that you have your numbers on your SSMS. You know how each row has its own number. Give me 1 second. Each row has its own number, right? So, you know, if there is an error, it'll say that there is an error on line number 72, right? So make sure when you're in the field that those numbers are actually on your actual SSMS, because in the field, it's going to tell you that, oh, there's an error, there's on state this line number 566. If you don't have it numbered, are you literally going to sit there and count each line 566 times? No. So make sure your numbers are there. Yes, ma'am. What's your question?
I was just telling, I can give you you can take the control of, I can open the SQL server and you can show us everything.
I can't understand you. You sound very, on my side, you sound very muffled.
She's saying if somebody shares their screen, you can take over their screen and
Yeah.
actually operate on SQL from somebody else's computer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a little technical for me. I'm not gonna do that. I'll just wait till next weekend, okay? I'm not gonna do that. Okay. All righty. So just make sure you have your numbers listed on your SSMS. So that's step number one. Like before, like when you get onto your job and they give you access to SQL and things like that, step number one, add your numbers because it's going to be very important. These queries that you see in real life are huge. And they're, when I say huge, they're huge. Okay. But you have to make sure that when it comes down to troubleshooting, that you know how to break those down. Okay. And then, so we're going to talk about troubleshooting. We're going to talk about CTEs. We're going to talk about temp tables. Okay. So the thing is that because the query is so large, and sometimes we're looking at line number 750 or line number 1077 because the queries go on and on and on and on. Like these queries are large. Like I don't want you to ever get overwhelmed, but I'm just preparing you for what really is there to come. These queries are large. Okay, but don't look at the big picture. Again, you just have to learn how to break them down into sections. Okay, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. So with this query, let's just say, for instance, I have a table. And again, you're going to be using joins a lot. You make note of that. You will use joins every single day on every single query. There will never, ever, really, ever, ever be a time where you're going to get everything that you need from one table. Okay? Especially if you're creating something, you're never going to get everything you need from one table. You're using joins a lot. And 95% of the time is a left. Okay? We don't use rights a lot simply due to the fact because your boss will just tell you, just swap it and say left, okay? Swap the table and just say left, okay? Don't give me a right, just swap it and just say left. The thing is, you're gonna use joins a lot. And so because you're using joins a lot, you're joining against multiple tables. One table may only have 500,000 rows. One table that I'm joining against may have 700,000 rows. Another table that I'm joining against may have 1 million rows. That's when things starts to get a little complicated. So if I'm joining one table that has 700,000 rows against another table that has maybe over 1 million rows, imagine all of the things that this table scan has to do because both of these tables are heap. There's no indexes, no nothing on these tables. They're just bare. So if it's having to go through 700,000 rows and turn around and go through 1 million rows, and then you expect it to come back in 1.25 seconds, not gonna happen. So then this is where you have to say, how can I increase my performance? Because I cannot add an index, can't add a primary key. If the table has to stay a heap, right? So what option should I choose? Should I choose a temp table? Should I choose a CTE? We're not even talking about views. We're not even talking about that because you can't create them. So we're not talking about that. Okay. So what am I using? A temp table or a CTE? This is when you need to determine when to use what. So step number one, or step number two, after you've added your numbers, step number two, in order for you to be able to increase performance without you having to add indexes or any type of constraints or anything like that, the thing you're going to have to determine is, what can I add? What kind of temporary structure can I add to this freaking table that's going to help me with performance? That's what I have to figure out. So here's your scenario. Rajni, you're in the field and the BA comes back to you and says, hey, I created a business requirement document. They need you to increase the performance on this actual report. Okay, the report is literally taking like 3 minutes to run. In your mind, you're probably saying it's just 3 minutes. It's not that long, but in the IT field, 3 minutes is like eternity. So again, I have a 12-year-old. I'm gonna make him stand in the corner for 3 minutes. Don't say nothing. Don't talk. Don't do nothing. Just stand for 3 minutes. That is the longest 3 minutes of his life. That's how you have to look at the actual end user. You have to look at them as children. They cannot sit there for 3 minutes and wait, and they don't know. And guess what, Rajni, when they hit it and it's taking 3 minutes, they're probably saying, is it broke or what's it doing? Guess what they're going to do? They're going to hit it again. They're going to hit execute again. Guess what? Now it's another 3 minutes is going.
Temp table.
And they're, huh?
I will create temp table.
Yeah, exactly. So guess what? So now they've hit it twice. And so guess what? Now there's an error. Okay. So Rajni, they're saying, or maybe it didn't come back an error. Maybe she said, I'll wait and see what happens. And it took 3 minutes and 45 seconds, almost 4 minutes for it to come back. And that's just one. I may need to run it again, but damn, do I have another 3 minutes to spare? Like, this report is taking way too long, and I'm trying to get all of this information, right? Maybe I need like 5 or 6 things from it, and I don't have 30 minutes to spend on one report. I just don't. Okay. So the thing is that what they're looking for is something to be done quickly. So the business requirement is written out by the business analyst, and then your manager assigns it to you, right? And in the business requirement document, you're reading it, Rajni, and it says, this report is taking way too long to respond, okay? And it's taking about 3+ minutes, maybe 4 minutes for me to get a result. Is there any way possible we can speed this process up? That's exactly how it's going to be written. What can we do, or is there anything we can do to speed this process up? So the business requirement document is going to say, Rajni, we need you to troubleshoot this to get this report to come back in a little bit of a faster time. Now, we talked about this last week. So Rajni, what is the very first thing we're going to do whenever I get they're telling me it's taking anywhere between 3 to 4 minutes for this project, for this actual report to run. You have the business requirement document. You understand that they're saying, they're not telling you what to do. They're not saying you need to add temp. They're not telling you that because they don't know that. They're not technical people. The only thing they're saying is, I want it, I want it, I want it. It's like a child. I want it, I want it. And you're probably like, there's a process. Wait, right? So you have the business requirement document, and it's saying, what can we do to speed this process up? What can we do to get this report to come back in a little bit of a faster time? If we can get it less than a minute, that's great. But they're not going to tell you how many minutes we want it. They're just saying that 3 to 4 minutes is not going to work. So what is the very first thing you're going to do now that you have the business requirement document?
First thing, I will check the data.
Okay, before we do, we talked about this last Wednesday. Before we even check the data, what is the very first thing you're going to do? You as a developer, what are you going to do?
Run the report.
Remember that, Rajni, you got to run it because you got to check this out for yourself. You don't ever just take anybody's word, okay? Because guess what? You may run it, it may come back in 8 seconds, and in your mind, you're probably saying, okay. And if that do happen, Rajni be like, okay, well, I ran it, and it came back in 8 seconds. So if you want, this is when you talk to the business analyst, and you come and say, listen, when I ran it, and I ran it multiple times, and it came back less than a minute. So if you want, you can come to my desk and you can take a look at it. And then at least then the business analyst can come back and say, well, when we ran it, it came back in this amount of seconds. So then at this point, it could be their computer or whatever. You see what I'm saying? Always run it. Don't ever just take someone's word. Check it out for yourself. Run it. And Josiah, where am I running it in? What environment am I running this report in?
The user end. So in the program that they would utilize.
Production. That is correct. User end. We're going to run it in production. Okay, remember that because I'm probably going to ask you again next week on Rising. Okay, so before we get to digesting into the report, before you just cut up somebody on the operating table, you got to figure out what's wrong. Run the report. Don't just take anybody's word. Run the report. So we ran the report, and guess what? It came back literally this time. It came back in 4 minutes and 10 seconds. So it means it's slowing down even more. We got to figure out what's wrong. Now we're going to now check the data set. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is basically we're going to run it, see how long it's taking. Okay. Now this is where you just have to play with it. You got to play. You're going to the actual data set is not going to say, Rajni, this actual table is what's running the slowest. That's not, it's not going to tell you that. It's just not. Okay. So this is when you have to start learn how to do when you have to start optimizing your queries and learning how much it costs for each query or each transaction to run and things like that. This is when you have to turn into SQL developers, people. This is why I say SQL is important. You have to know it. Okay. It's not all about creating dashboards and making things pretty. You still have to do the back end work. Okay. All right. So now, Unfortunately, Rajni, it's not going to say table number ABC 1, 2, 3 is what's slowing you down. So it's not going to tell you that. Okay. So my thing about it is that what I'm going to do is I'm pretty much going to I'm going to basically, like I said, run the query. And then after I run the query, I'm going to see how long it takes for it to run in development. Okay. On the developer's end. Okay. So once I run it in production, that was the report. Now I've taken the data set. I remember I took the data set and I put it into SSMS. So you're going to take the entire data set and put it into SSMS. Remember? Okay. Again, this is all very, I promise you, when you guys hit the field, y'all don't know how to troubleshoot because you're gonna be like, okay, so Mika said do this, and we're gonna cover this like every single time to make sure you understand the process. Okay, you run the report or you run the package, whatever you need to do, you're gonna do it in production. Wherever the end user is seeing it at the problem, you need to go where the problem is and run it to see if it's giving you the same issues. After that happens, take the data set, the entire data set, and put it into your SMS. You will not do it in Visual Studios because Visual Studios does not give you the numbers that you need like SSMS, right? So take the entire data set from the actual report or from your package or whatever and paste it into SSMS and then run it. See how long it takes for it to come back. And you already go at the bottom, it tells you it came back in this amount of time. Now, this is when you have to start playing operator. I'm like, okay, which table is, why are you giving me the issues? Why are you giving me the issues? So you may have to do some type of query optimizations. You got to see which one is going to cost you the most, whatever the case may be. But in my case, I am now going to take pretty much each join, or shall I say each select statement that I have, and I'm going to run it, just each individual select statements. This is how you're troubleshooting at this point. Troubleshooting is not some big, huge thing. Troubleshooting is you just figuring it out, okay? All right, so you're going to, now, because you have this huge data set, do not get overwhelmed because the data set is so large. Break it down. Take each individual select statement. One select statement may be longer than the other, but don't take multiple select statements. Just take one select statement, put it into a different query, run it. See how long that query takes. Guess what? I'm going to do the none. I'm going to go down. Okay, I'm going to take this select statement. This select statement may have case statements and it may have a bunch of filters in it. That's probably where your problem is lying at. Okay, so now the first case statement we ran, the first select statement we ran, Rajni, we just had like a regular select statement. We had a couple joins, and then maybe 2 filters, and it came back literally like in, I don't know, let's just say 12 seconds. Boom. Well, guess what? That's not your problem. Guess what? We don't need that one because that's not our problem. Guess what? I'm gonna go find the next one. This select statement has select statements. It has probably like 4 joins on it. And on this one, they may have a couple of case statements in it. And then they may actually have a CTE in it, who knows? And then guess what? They may actually have like where the filters, where, you know, what it says, where such and such equals this, or such and such equals this. And then they may have a subquery within that actual filter and blah, blah, blah. And then they may have an and and an or. So guess that. Let's just say, for instance, Rajni, and I'm not over exaggerating, they may have 7 filters, where this equals this, where this is between this, where this equals select, and they may have a subquery inside of that filter. Run it, because it's probably where your problem is going to lie. You have a lot of filters going through there. Okay, so then at this point, run it. You also need to determine when you're running, when it's got all those filters in there. So when you run it, let's say, this one is coming back in about 1 minute and 30 seconds. That's too long. Okay, so now at this point, the next step, check to see how many rows is in each one of those tables that's joining within that select statement. Now we have to determine, do we want a CTE or do we want a temp table? Because if it's taking 1 minute and 30 seconds just for this one small little snippet, and it's probably got all of these filters in it, it's got all of these filters, all of these joins. It may have a CTE. It may have a couple of subqueries in it. It probably got some case statements. Guess what? This is probably going to be your corporate. But that does not mean stop here because, oh, I figured it out. Nope. Check your other ones. Check your other select statements because you may have to add more than one temp table. Run your other queries. Run your other select statements. This is how you're troubleshooting. This is what troubleshooting does. You're just finding out what the problem is and you're fixing it. That's all troubleshooting is. Where is the problem? If all the other queries, other select statements within that sort procedure, Rajni, is coming back less than a second, but that one is coming back in a minute and 30, this is probably your issue. Because once you then take that minute and 30 and then you combine it with the other ones, which may also have filters against it. Yeah, because guess what? The filters is the first thing they're running. Okay. Before the select statement is even done, the filters is the first thing they're running. Okay. All right. So let's just say, for instance, we figured out that's the problem. That is your corporate. That is the problem. So with that being said, now I have to determine, do I want a CTE or do I want to add a temp table? All right. CTE. CTEs are wonderful when it comes to looking up things. When you're needing something, it's a temporary table, just like a temp table, they're temporary, and you can create CTEs all day long. You have access, permissions to create those and put them into your queries. You have permission, okay? But CTEs are not wonderful on performance. They're not. So if you know, Rajni, for certain that you have this one select statement that's got all of these joins against it. Well, let's just say four, like I said, about 4 joins on it, right? 4 or 5 joins. And well, it can't be 5, but it's about 4 joins, right? So let's say you got about 4 joins on it, and then you have like 7 filters, a couple of case statements. There's some subqueries inside of your filters. CTE is probably not going to be the best because CTEs are not the best when it comes to performance. Okay, so your CTE is something that I would use if I'm looking for something in particular and I don't plan to use this query anymore. Does that make sense? I don't plan to use this anymore. This is just something I just need to figure out real quick right now. And maybe it's just a query that I created and I stuck it in there and boom. And maybe this, Rajni, it would work if I'm the only one that's using this report, or let's just say Josiah, who's the manager, is the only person using this report, but he only pulls it twice a year. CTE will probably work best for you. Okay. If you have a report or any type of package that you know is constantly being used all the time, the CTE is not going to work for you because you're dealing with performance issues at this point. CTEs is not it. You have to look at it as if I came to you, Lillian, and said, Lillian, so there's this one table that I need you to take a look at, and I only want you to tell me how many rows is actually, take a look at all of it. I need you to write a CTE. I'm probably not going to tell you that, but I need you to write a query that's going to show me a list of all of the tables that actually has, and it gives me the amount of rows that are actually expired in each table. CTE will be perfect for that. Because guess what? I'm not asking you to create a report or a package or anything against that. I just need you to tell me what the information is. Maybe they came to you, Lillian, and they just said, do that and put this information into put it into an Excel sheet, and that's all I need. CTE would work. No one's using this report. This is not a report. Lillian is creating an Excel sheet and giving it to Josiah, and he's just going to take it to the actual board. And guess what? When he's done, he's never going to use the Excel sheet again. CTEs will be perfect. Don't waste your time on temp tables. CTE will be perfect for that. No one's using it again. Does that make sense? You're going to get that a lot. They don't need no elaborate report or anything. They just said, hey, I need a list of all of the actual tables and tell me exactly how many, each one of these tables, how many of the rows are expired. I just need the total numbers of rows expired on each table. Can you get that to me by lunch? CTE is going to be your wonderful, wonderful friend. Because guess what? Once Lillian creates it and puts it into an Excel sheet, she's going to give it to Josiah, and Lillian may never, ever, ever see that daggone Excel sheet ever again in her life. This is something that Josiah came to her and asked for personally. You see what I'm saying? Even though there may not even be a business requirement document. He might have asked for it in the meeting. Does that make sense? This is something that is only for Josiah. No one else in the company is using it. It's Josiah was the only person who asked for it. CTE is going to be what you're going to need. Now, if Josiah came to Lillian and then said, this is what I need you to do. I'm noticing that I want you to create me an actual dashboard that shows create a dashboard, and it's me and Annie and Sophia and Robel. We're all going to be using this report. And then we only need to just see the amount of tables that are actually being the amount of the tables that have with the total amount of rows that are expired. And then I want a variable to be added into there. So that way it automatically fluctuates and goes up and down. So as each table rows continue to grow in each table, the report will reflect that. Then a CTE is not going to be your best bet. Does that am I making sense? If it's a table, if it's something, a project or a report or a dashboard that is only being used for one-time use, it's just something real quick to look something up, CTE is the way to go. But if if it's a report that more than one user is using and they're needing it and they need it to reflect every single month to show this and that, CTE is not the way to go. 10 tables.
Yes, I have a question on this.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a related question. I got an interview. They asked me, it's in the past. So if you have a chance to use in your work, do you prefer CTE or temp table often?
Okay, so the question they asked you was, which one do you prefer the best, the most
Yes.
useful? Would you
Yes.
consider using a temp table or a CTE? So are you asking me how would you respond to that answer?
Yes.
Okay. So Wandato, that is a trick question, okay? All righty, so when they ask you that, you're gonna basically say, well, it depends on the query, okay? Because it's a trick question. Depends on the query. You can't just say, oh, I prefer a temp table, but if I don't, like I was just explaining, if it's just something just like I just need real quick, I don't need a temp table. So the best way to answer that is going to say, well, it really depends on the query and basically what is it that we're needing. Okay, so then this is when you would have to give a story. So you would say, I know, like at one time, because you always want to put yourself there. Okay, so you're gonna be like, so at one time I had an actual manager, I probably would say Josiah. So I had a manager, his name was Josiah, and he basically just come to me and he just asked me to provide him with an Excel sheet, just showing him each table and he wanted the total amount of tables that were actually expired, rows that were expired within that table. And this was just something he just needed real quick. So yeah, at that time I did create a CTE. I didn't really find it important to use a temp table because I knew this was just a report that he was just going to use one time. And then on top of that, if I do decide to use something where I know that, and there's no point of me taking up space in the database or using a temp DB to create something that I know is only going to use one time. Why do that? Unless I drop the temp table. But why drop it or even create it when I can just create a CTE when I know it's only going to be used that one time? Okay, now, then I said, but then there was also this other time where he did ask for it, but then after I created that for him, he came back and says, okay, this was perfect. So if you could go ahead and create me a dashboard and this person is using it. And they basically want the report to reflect how many rows are actually expired in each table. And every time a row is expired in a table, then that report should reflect that. So I ended up taking that exact same query, but instead of me using a CTE, that's when I implemented the temp table because then I knew they were going to be using this table quite a bit. With me using a CTE, I know it was going to hurt me with performance-wise because I'm using it often. I felt like a temp table would be the best. So which one do I prefer the most? Again, it just really depends on the query and what the end product we're looking for. That's the best way to answer it. You can't just say one or the other because it really depends on the query. What is it that we're looking for? But again, just don't say one or the other. It's just really just depend on what is the end user is looking for. And then that's how you can determine. I like both. I think temp tables or CTEs are a lifesaver. They do save time. So I think they're wonderful, but I can't choose one over the other simply due to the fact that, it just really depends on what it is the end user needs. And that's what I determine. That's what I prefer at that moment. Okay, so we're back onto Rajni. So now, Rajni, now that we have our CTE, now we know what our situation is. We know that this one actual query is running about a minute and some change before I can get anything. All the other queries are running fine. It's just one, and this one is sticking out the most, okay? This is when I'm probably gonna say, 9 times out of 10, Rajni, these actual tables do not have any indexes on it. And there may be one index or none at all, or there may be several or none at all. There may be several non-clustered indexes, and that's what's hurting you because there's so many non-clustered indexes on that. But you can't go to the DBA or the SQL developer, Rajni, and say, yeah, I see that we have like 9 non-clustered indexes on this table. You know, if possible, we could take a few of these off because this is hurting my performance. You can't do that. Okay, you just can't. It's kind of like somebody walking up to your house and saying, if you do not park your car in your driveway, can you actually put it in the garage? That's why you have a garage. Like, park in my driveway if I want to, it's my driveway. That's the same thing. You going to a SQL developer telling them what to do with their stuff is the same thing as me coming to say, Martha, can you not park in your driveway? You have an actual garage. Can you, just like at night, put your car in the garage? We're trying to keep a clean slate on the street. That's what that is. And in my mind, I'm thinking, are you serious, Aiden? Let me go ahead and get this knife because I'm about to cut one of my neighbors. Okay, so that's the same thing. You cannot tell somebody what to do with their stuff. And with you being the person that you are, Rosny, unfortunately, you do not have permissions to create an index, to remove an index, or anything like that. You just can't. Okay, so now you have to figure out with all of these non-clustered indexes that is killing you right now, what can I do to fix it? This is you troubleshooting. 9 times out of 10, your best bet is to go with a temp table. You can't go with a view because you can't create one. And you're probably saying, how do you expect me to do my job if I don't have permission to do nothing? Honey, you just have to be quick on your feet. They only give you a limited supply. You just have to make it do, okay? It's kind of like you're baking a cake and it requires you to have 2 eggs. You only have 1. What are you gonna do? I mean, I can go to the store, but I don't have a car. I can't just get up and just go to the store. It's the same thing. I can't just create a view. I can't just get up and go to the store. What can I do if my cake requires me to have 2 eggs and all I have is 1? What can I do? Even though we're talking about cake, you're still troubleshooting that gum cake. Okay, you're troubleshooting this cake. What can I do? So at this point, this is when you start to say, I can probably implement a temp table. This is probably where I'm going to have to do it. I'm probably going to implement this temp table, and that'll help me with performance because there's like 700,000 rows on this one, a million and something rows on this one. And then with all of these filters, I have to be able to implement a CTE and then let the filters hit against the CTE versus the table. Does that make sense? Remember last week we talked about it. Whenever there's a heap on it, remember I told you it's going to start at 1, it's going to do a full table scan. And it's going to find that first filter. And it's going to say, oh, guess what? Rajni's a girl. Great. It's going to start back at 1 and go all the way down. And it's going to say, oh, Annie's a girl. That's 2. And it's going to start back at 1 and go all the way down. And it's got to do that until it gets through all 700,000 rows. It's going to do that until it gets through all 1 million rows. But if you create a temp table and say, I want to select all the females, I want all the females. I want the female, well, not females. I want the gender. I select gender, sex, age, date of birth, right? And then you're saying from this table or whatever, because you're pulling it from that 700,000 row table. You're probably pulling it from that 1 million table, okay? And you're pulling that information, and then you're probably going to create a filter inside of that, or maybe not. And then guess what? Boom. Because guess what? On a temp table, you can add indexes and all that stuff on your actual. So again, make it work for you. And then once you create your temp table, you're going to implement it there. You're going to put it in there. And now once you do that, now you put your temp table. If you have your select statement and your joins and things like that, you're going to implement your temp table, and then you're going to then create, or implement your temp table. And then you're going to then create a select statement to hit against the temp table, because all of the filters that you need is now inside of that temp table. And now it's easy for all 9 of those filters that's hitting that actual query to hit the temp table versus those 900 or that 1,000,000 row tables. And guess what? Instead of it coming back in 4 minutes, it's going to come back like in, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds or 15 seconds. Guess what? Now you're going to take that information, that query that you just created, and now you're going to, like I said, once you implement your temp table, run the query, see how long it takes for it to come back. If it's still taking too long, you may have to implement another temp table. You may have to put another one in there. Okay. So then once you do that, once everything is running, and so you're going to take that one particular query that you had, and you're going to put it back into the big query and run the whole thing, the whole data set again to see how long it's going to take. This time, now we've implemented temp tables. At this point, Rajni, now the query is taking like 32 seconds to run. Perfect. That's miracles compared to 4 minutes. Okay, it is now running 30. So guess what? You're now going to take that full query, put it back into the data set. You're going to run the actual report in development, because remember, we did everything in development. You're going to run the report in development once you put the data set back together. See how long it takes the report to now run. The report came once you ran it in development. That report now takes 42 seconds. Perfect. Okay. Taking 42 seconds, wonderful. Deploy it to UAT, let them test it, deploy it to production, tell the business analyst, check it. Business analyst is going to run that report in production once you deployed it. Guess what? It's coming back in 40-something seconds. She's saying, oh, thank God. Guess what? She's now going to go back to Josiah and say, okay, you can run it now. Check it. Josiah runs it, and he's going to say, thank God, because I've been sitting here and waiting for that report for 4 minutes, and it's coming back in less than a minute. Perfect. Perfect. You have done your job. That is all troubleshooting is. Finding out what the problem is and just fixing it. But don't get overwhelmed because you see a large query. Take each select statement, but take the full select statement, okay? But just take each select statement and run them individually and figure out what is the problem, okay?
Quick question on the solving the issue. If you have the issue, if you have the heap and it's going line by line and you create your temp table, you're going to want to index your temp table based on the data, or are you going to still leave it as a heap as you're pulling it into your temp table?
I would, my thing is that I would still leave it as a heap. That's just my opinion. I would still leave it as a heap. You can, like I said, you can do your indexes and things like that. It gets a little messy a little bit, but it's very helpful if you want to. But to me, I'm going to probably leave it as a heap because, again, I'm not the only one that's probably using this report. Or
well, if it's a temp table, yeah, if it's a temp table, though, it's gonna once it's utilized, then it's gonna go away, right? And so wouldn't an index be faster in terms of pulling the information instead of having to go line by line?
The index on the actual temp table?
Yeah.
You can definitely do that because you can actually add your indexes, and you can, because my thing about it is you're going to create the temp table, but you're going to drop it at the end of this query. Yeah. Okay. So my thing, or at the end of the query, at the end of the main query, you're going to drop the temp table. So my thing about it is you can definitely do that because, like you said, we're dropping the temp table. So you can definitely add indexes to it if you feel like, even if after I put the temp table on there and then I felt like 42 seconds is still too long, maybe I want to get it down a little bit further, right? Maybe then at this point, I probably will consider, if instead of adding another temp table, maybe I will consider adding an index. I'm going to drop it at the end of the query anyways. Yeah. So yeah, you can definitely do it. I don't do it. I don't ever add indexes to my temp tables, but you can definitely do it because it can definitely help the performance of the actual temp table. So yeah, you definitely can. I just don't do it because it gets a little messy for me, child. Listen, I'm great with query, but I'm not that damn great, Josiah. It gets a little messy for me. Any other questions?
So Mika, so we are using the temp table to filter out the data that are very slowing. The data that are going very slow. Are we using the temp table?
So okay. Yeah, so the temp table is I think I talked about this last week. So if I have that, okay, so remember that 700,000 row table I was just talking about, right? So if it doesn't, even if it does have an index on it, it could still take a little while, even if it does, because it may only have just one index, okay? But let's just say, for instance, for the sake of this situation, that it's a heap, okay? So this actual table is a heap. It has 700,000 rows. All right, we have 24 people that's on this call. Now, the thing is that when you're running the actual query, so some say I'm I want to select, like I said, gender, age, date of birth, social security number, address, city, state. I want all of this stuff. I'm selecting all of this stuff from this 700,000 row table, ABC 1, 2, 3 table, okay? And then guess what? I have literally like 9 filters against it. Sophia, do you understand what I mean when I say filters?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So I have like 9 filters against just this one select statement. So even though it's 700,000 rows, it's probably gonna come back pretty fast because it's just this one table. But what if I'm joining against multiple tables? You see what I'm saying? It's gonna slow it down a little bit because now we got to cross-reference and do this and check this table because we're joining against this table. So it's a lot. And we're doing all 700,000. And it's checking, it is collecting all of the genders and getting all this information. We're never gonna select all because that's a lot. So I'm only gonna select the things that I need. But these filters is what's hurting me. It's the filters that's slowing me down. Because even though the 700,000 rows are saying, I'm going to pull back all of the genders and the ages and all this other stuff, but my filter is saying, but I only want you to select me the gender and the ages and all of the other stuff. I only want that information, the people that all the selects, I only want to select of just females. But can't just be any female, she's got to have long hair. Can't just be any long hair, she has to have glasses. Can't just have glasses, she has to have on a black shirt. Can't just have on a black shirt, there's got to be a V-neck. You see what I'm saying? Like all of these filters is a lot, okay? So with that being said, it's going through table, it's starting at row 1 and it's going down, and it's seeing that Rajni is a female, but guess what? Rajni doesn't have on a black shirt. So it's going to keep going. Oh, she has a black shirt and she has glasses. She's a female, all of this stuff, right? We found Rashida. Guess what? It's gonna start back at 1. It's gonna go all the way down. It's gonna pass Rashida because Rashida's already selected. Yada yada yada. I want Lillian, but she's she's red shirt. Gotta keep going, and it's gonna keep doing that. And the thing about it with the heap is that it's got to do a full table scan. It's gonna do a full table scan. Versus if I had an actual index on there, as you already know, if you have a clustered index, it organizes the data for you. But non-clustered index on there, it basically just points you in that direction, right? But unfortunately, because there's no indexes on it, it has to do a full table scan. Full, because guess what? If it was an index on that actual table Sophia, it would organize, it would put everybody probably like whatever however you put it, maybe you put them in alphabetical order. Or maybe whatever index you put on there, maybe you put them, it's going off of the ID. So it's in numerical order, or maybe it's in alphabetical order or whatever, then that's easy. Or maybe you put the index on gender where it has all the females at the top and then all the males at the bottom, then that's easy. It doesn't have to do a full table scan. But when you have a mixture of different people all inside, and there's a female on row 2, 3, and then it skips down to 17, 12, and like it has to do a full table scan versus where if it was already organized, maybe all the females were at the top and all the males were at the bottom. So once it gets down to half point, that's all the females. I don't have to finish to doing the scan. Does that make sense? Because the rest at the bottom is just guys, because the index saying that all the females are at the top. So it's only going to do just the top. Once it gets to the end of the females, boom, I don't have to continue to doing the actual scan because I know at the bottom it's nothing but guys, right? So now with those temp tables, that temp table is going to allow me to take all the filters that I'm looking for. Black shirt, glasses, long hair, V-neck, female, age, whatever, right? And then it's going to put those results. So let's just say, for instance, I said I want a black shirt, chick with glasses, she has to have long hair, shirt has to be V-neck, okay? It's gonna go and find all 4 of those filters inside that 700,000 rows. And let's just say out of that 700,000 rows, it came back with 500 of, out of 700,000, 500 of them meet all 4 requirements, right? So they're gonna take that 500 and place it into a temp table. Only the results, only the people that meets those 4 requirements, 500 out of 700,000, 500 will then move to the temp table. Okay, so now when I do my select statement, I can basically say, now that I have these 500 people that meet all 4, how many of them are actually, I don't know, maybe you put the age on there. So maybe you chose an age, you have an age range, and you actually have an age column, so you can say that. And then you just said within the age range, how many out of all 500, how many of them are actually the age 22? It'll come back in this amount of seconds because it's only querying against 500 versus 700,000. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry that was a really long answer. But yeah, but that's how it goes. That's why temp tables are so wonderful, because it allows you to take those filters and then basically put the results of everything you're looking for inside of the actual query. I mean, inside of the actual temp table, and now do your search against the temp table. And you're probably saying out of 500, how many people are actually just 25? Boom, it'll come back less than a second. So that's why temp tables are so wonderful. And even though you create them, drop them. Okay, don't take up space on your database, drop it. Okay, so when you go and you're going to go to the top, you're going to create the temp table. But what you're going to do is you're going to do a search first, and you're going to basically write an if statement. And the if statement is going to be like, if this temp, and give the temp name, the temp table name. If it exists, then drop the temp table you just created. Okay. If not, then it's going to say create, and then blah, 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 and then move forward. And then at the very end of your query, drop it. You don't never really want to take a lot of your space because you use temp tables so much, drop them. And it also helps remove duplicates and things like that. Okay. All right.
Mika, how you handle error code? If you have error code of the same statement you just said, and you have error code in whatever number, and then asking you, okay, resolve this error code, and you have error code on a column or a row, how you handle that?
You said the error code. Well, you know, when they say, like, are you talking about like when it says the problem lies on line number 27?
Yeah. So you have error code.
Okay, so when you're running your query, okay, and it tells you state number blah, and then it says line number 27, then go to line number 27, because that's going to be your problem. Okay, go to line number 27, and it could say line number 27 table doesn't exist. So then guess what? You need to go to line number 27. Go to line number 27, and then now, just because it says line number 27, they're telling you that it may say column doesn't exist or whatever. So what you have to do is figure out the column that they're saying that it doesn't exist on line number 27. Whatever column doesn't exist, you need to figure out where you pulled that column from, what table you pulled it from. Okay, so if you have a join, and say you join on table A and there's table B, okay, and then you ran it and it gave you an error, and it says column name gender doesn't exist, but that's line 27 because the column name is actually written on 27. Okay, it's actually written on line 27. But that does not mean that, oh, I can't go beyond that. No, if they're saying that line number 27, column name gender doesn't exist, then that means you need to figure out what table are you actually pulling this column from. Does that make sense? Go to the table and then check. And maybe gender actually has gender underscore X. Maybe they changed it because it could be the ETL people who changed the column. And most of the time when they do change it, they'll tell you, but it's your responsibility to go and create a CTE, figure out what table is actually using this column. And then guess what? Change them, okay? Otherwise, you're going to run across problems like that. So if it could be gender no longer exists, it could actually just say they could have changed it and added a new column, and now it says female, male, right? Gender probably is not there. Okay, so my thing about it is that you just have to figure out if there's an issue on line 27, that does not mean that you can't go beyond 27. It's just telling you that column name doesn't exist, which is gender, right? So if gender doesn't exist, find out what table you pulled that gender from, and then figure out what is the new column name, or did it change, or does the column no longer exist? Did gender just leave? That's the problem you have to figure out. But that's all you have to do. So it's kind of like a starting point for you. Okay.
Yeah, I got you. Thank you.
So it would be wonderful if they said problem on line number 27. So check this table. That would be wonderful. But you just have to figure out where you pulled it from. But most of the time there's aliases, or you probably put like an A because it came from table A. So you says A.gender, right? So now you know it came from table A. So just go to table A. And like I said, maybe they changed it. They probably put an S at the end. Maybe it's genders now instead of just gender. Or maybe you misspelled it. I don't know, right? So that's all. It's just a starting point. It's telling you where it is. Now it's up to you to figure out why this column doesn't exist.
All right. Thank you.
Mika, I have 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1 question, as an ETL developer, if we are designing the data mart or data warehouse, so still we do not have permission to create tables or schema or whatever.
You still don't. You'll do a lot of querying, maintaining queries and troubleshooting store procedures and things like that, but you still won't have permission to create you still won't have permission to like create tables and CTEs, create tables and triggers. You still won't have access to that or permissions to do that. Mainly those stuff comes from the SQL developer, or it will come from your actual DBA, or it could come from your team lead, but only your team lead, even he or she, only has temporary access to do that. Okay. Yeah, so that's really the SQL developer's role. Now, if you get to a company, Rajni, and you get to a company and they tell you that they want you to do both, they're saying, we're going to really need you to do a lot of SQL developer roles because we don't have SQL developers here, then yes, you'll have permissions because you're being the SQL developer, okay? But if they hired you strictly just for ETL data warehouse work, or strictly just for Power BI or Tableau, no, you do not have permission, even if you're doing it. Even if you're dealing with queries all day, every day, you still don't have permission. Okay. Now, this is what I can leave you with. Now, triggers. Ooh, okay. So triggers is a tough one. Okay. Triggers, you'll see them a lot, but you won't really have to work with them a lot because you don't have permission to even fire them. Okay. Like you can, it's bad enough you can't create them, which is kind of like a godsend. It's like, thank you, God. Because who didn't understand triggers? Me. Okay. So the thing about it is that was a blessing because I didn't have to deal with them, because I don't have to worry about firing them and I don't have to worry about creating them. And so because I can't create them, even if I'm in development, I still can't run it. Like it's going to throw me an error and tell me I don't have permission. And I'm like, I'm in my own server. How do I have permission? Sorry, you still don't have access or permission to even run the query. If it's a query and you run it, so say there's a problem, and like I told you, you run it, you run the query, the data set, and guess what it gives you? It tells you you don't have permission. Contact UDBA, right? So the reason why is because there's a trigger on it. You don't have permission to run it. Now, if it's a problem that you need to solve, you can't go to the DBA and say, well, there's a trigger on it, so you're gonna have to fix it because I don't have permission. That would be wonderful if we could say that, but unfortunately you can't. If you find yourself in a situation where there is an actual trigger on an actual query that you're dealing with, this is when you actually go to the DBA and ask for temporary access. Okay. And you're saying, hey, I have this report and I've got to get it out like this week, but there's a trigger on it. Can you give me permission or access to it for 24 hours or just a couple of hours? And he'll say absolutely. And he'll probably give you access for about 24 hours. But I promise you, when you walk in the next day, the restriction will be moved. Okay, it will be removed. But you can't just go to your DBA and say, hey, there's a trigger on it, so it's your problem now. You can't. Okay, you actually have to probably go and say, you probably go to your team lead or your DBA and say, hey, there's a trigger on it. And most of the time, if you have a really good manager, he'll probably say, oh, don't worry about it, I'll take it. Because the DBA is not just gonna just randomly just hand out permissions just because you ask for it. Okay, he's gonna grill you like you in the interrogation room. What do you need it for? How long you need it? I mean, I know there's a trigger, but is there another way you can get around it? You're like, dude, I can't even run the query because the freaking trigger is sitting in the middle of it. I can't do anything. I can't even run the regular select statements, nothing. Like, I can't do anything, right? So they're going to quiz you on it. So most of the time, if you have a really good manager, they'll be like, oh, don't worry about it. And most of the time, you don't run into this problem, Roshan, because remember I told you that your manager will take a look at the actual business requirement document, and most of the time they know whether or not there is an actual trigger on it, and they'll assign it to someone else, or he'll keep it for himself, because they're not going to just randomly just assign you permission just because you asked for it. But if it happens to fall in your lap, go to your manager or go to the DBA and say, hey, there's a trigger, I don't have permission, can I have access? And then this is when you're just going to pray to God that you really understand triggers, okay? All right, and that's pretty much how that goes. I'm gonna leave you with that. That's pretty much how that goes. That's the same thing when it comes to like deadlocks and things of that nature, but you don't ever have to worry about that. That is strictly DBA and SQL. Like, you do not have to worry about things like that. You guys enjoy the rest of your morning, and I will see you guys later.
Thank you, Mika.
Thank you, Mika.
Bye.
Thank you, Mika.